Good evening and welcome to the General Government Town Hall tonight on community mental health and wellness. My name is Renata Rollins. I'm the chair of General Government, and this is part of a series of town halls focusing initially focusing on our community's recovery from the COVID pandemic, sponsored by the Olympia City Council. But tonight's topic in particular about community mental health and wellness is also so relevant for the additional crisis that we're going through right now related to racism and coming to terms with racism and in our institutions and in our communities. And so it's very timely to be hosting this, and I want to thank all the folks signed in to listen. We got word we have over 100 people logged in tonight to hear from some of our community experts about mental health and crisis response. So let's see, the purpose is to inform the community about resources and assistance available to the community during these crises. And we're just so happy to have the panelists. I'm going to introduce our moderator tonight as well as the panelists. So Jay Burney, our city manager, is going to be moderating the panel tonight and taking questions from folks at home. We also have Keith Staley on the panel. He's our interim assistant city manager. And then we're joined by Ruth Middlebrook, the director of secondary special services at the Olympia School District. Angie Wohl, chief mission officer, Providence, Southwest Washington. Marissa Strobel, community outreach specialist with the crisis clinic of Thurston and Mason counties. And Ann Larson, who's the outreach services coordinator with the city of Olympia. And of course, I would be remiss not to introduce my fellow committee members on council. We have Danny Madrone and council member Clark Gilman as well to host this panel for us. So with that, I will pick it over to Jay Burney to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Councilmember Rollins. As Councilmember Rollins indicated, I'm Jay Burney. I'm the city manager. I'll be serving as your moderator tonight. You will not see me on your camera. I am the voice in the background. In terms of how this will go tonight, the event will last till right around 6:30. You'll hear briefly from each of our panelists that were just introduced. And then after that, we'll have about 20 minutes set aside for Q&A for the panelists. For those of you that are interested in the Q&A portion, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A tab. If you just type your question in there, that's where I will go to look for questions. And when the time comes, I will serve those questions up. I'll pull them out of the mix and give them to the panelists for response. We ask that everyone keep their communication with each other kind and respectful. To save time, I'll do my best to combine similar questions and themes. I may reframe some of the questions just to make sure they're clear as I deliver them to the panelists. And if any question requires a follow-up, I'll do my best to ask that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith Staley, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Jay. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now, and we're going to run through a series of slides that will help us with this presentation and these materials. So first off, good evening to the panelists, good evening to the community members, and good evening to the council members. My hope for this evening is that people can walk away understanding that what they may be feeling is normal. If you're feeling anxiety, depression, tension that you don't normally feel, these are not normal times, and what you're feeling is normal. I want people to know that they're not alone. I want them to know that there are resources available to help deal with these feelings, and that we will be better on the other side of these events. So a quick glance at the news doesn't take long to see that there's something going on. The headlines are dramatic. The world's so upside down. The virus is taking a toll on young people's mental health. There's issues in regards to Black employees and their mental health. Just the coronavirus in general having an impact on the mental health of our entire world, really. And then, you know, there's lots out there in the internet and in the world about remedies and things that we can do, and we're going to be discussing all of that, but not in a great detail. I've been looking forward to this town hall meeting for quite some time, since we first introduced the topic, and I know that personally I am feeling more anxious, more irritable than normal. I've been left having feelings of anger and frustration and losing my sense of optimism. And I know if I'm feeling that, there's probably others in the world who are feeling that as well. So I think it's really important that we have this panel gathered here that can help just identify that and share that those feelings are normal, and that, yes, we are experiencing stress in a way that we may not have experienced it before. So again, what you're feeling is normal. You are not alone. There are resources to help, and we will be better on the other side. The state of Washington has a coronavirus webpage, and of course, early on, they recognized the tremendous mental health impacts of the coronavirus. There's some excellent resources there. There's a phone number there for anybody experiencing distress and needs somebody to talk to. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. This presentation and other resources will be posted online following this meeting, and I'm certainly available via email to follow up with any questions. So next speaker is Angie Woolley.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Angie Woolley. I serve as the Chief Mission Integration Officer at for Providence Southwest, but I hang out a lot at Providence St. Peter. So, Keith, that was a really great way to introduce this. And if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, you framed it so well. And I first want to just applaud everybody who's on this call, because there's something in you that has said, I'm interested, I want to find out a little bit more information. And so I think we're all kind of started at the beginning of 2020, you know, slowly, where did normal go? You know, there is so much loss, loss upon loss, very disorienting. I know I'm saying what you're experiencing, I'm stating the obvious, but I think it's really important to name it. I mean, we've little losses as well as very big losses. A loss of routine, a loss of job, the way we engage as humans, human to human, has shifted. Now the way we see each other, some people have masks, some people don't, or just seeing just people's eyes, all of this, just how we are moving about our daily lives, shopping, whatever that is, or not shopping, or sequestering at home, or filtering all of this. And so just as Keith said, you're not alone. And this pervasive sense of uncertainty, it does lead us to just figure out what is happening. And I liked, a friend of mine coined this, you know, where did normal go? But what is the new, people say, what's the new normal? I think what's the new abnormal? It's just another way of looking at it. And so if we look at the next slide, you know, there was a Harvard Business Review article that basically said that stuff you're feeling, that's grief. And so grief shows up in a lot of different ways. And I want to just frame a little bit, just for us to realize these layers and layers and layers of grief that happen. And it shows out like you squeeze a tube of toothpaste, it's going to squirt out in some way. And these are just some ways that grief may or may not be showing up for you, but it can look like sadness or crying. It it shows up with headaches or difficulty sleeping. Yes, grief manifests itself in that way. Anxiety, frustration, loss of appetite, questioning purpose, questioning your spirituality, questioning what am I about. These bigger questions show up. You can feel detached, especially when we are in these, like, what does connection look like? Connection's looking so different. Here we are on Zoom, and so grief can show up with worry and guilt and anger and stress. And I in the next slide, I think it's a lot of times we talk about stages of grief, and it's not linear. But I like this demonstration because it talks about, it just gives us some language or some words to put around how we're feeling and where we are in this. And I don't know about you, but my experience on the right of that can be all over the place because there are so many things showing up, loss upon loss upon loss. And it feels like you just get your balance and then it can knock you off. So I offer this just as an image for you to note that first of all, you move in it and through it and around it. And that's important, this moving piece. It's fluid. We may go 2 or 3 steps forward, 1 step back. You may crisscross, but it's good to kind of notice that you can move through it. And so if you go to the next slide, I want to offer, what are some things you can do? What are some things that help with grief? And let me just say a disclaimer, in 5 minutes, I'm not going to give you a magic bullet. So I want to, name that this is being in it. This is recognizing it. Seeing a slide is not, a magic bullet. But what can come out of this, and this is my hope too, is that sometimes once you name it, once you name what you're feeling and can start to, it gives you some power. It gives you some acknowledgement. So figuring out feelings that are so fluid, naming what you're feeling. I'm sad, I'm tired, I'm frustrated. Keith did a great job of modeling that for us. Here's what's going on. And also letting you know that you don't have to be your feelings, embrace those feelings and let them flow through, but being in the present. Where am I now? Because we can get trapped in the past of what have I lost, or we can think more negatively, what's the future going to hold? But what we can, and we can't control those, but what we can do is be awake in the moment. So I think another piece of this is what's so important is the word doling out compassion. Dole out compassion for yourself. If you're feeling stuck and can't move or listless, okay, you can be there and give yourself that compassion. It also applies for giving compassion to others, because while we're moving around in our bubble of grief, feelings that we're trying to make sense of, so is everybody else. And it's showing up differently for others as well. And so the more we can be gentle with ourselves and with each other as we're moving, we are just heightened and sensitive these days with everything that is emerging. So here are a few other just concrete things. Reach out and connect. The isolation is really challenging, and so finding ways. The fact that you're even on this call says that you're connecting and you're reaching out and you're whether it's looking for information or connecting with others, connecting with Zoom, finding that way to kind of step out of it. Sometimes it helps to develop a routine for many of us. Of us have lost jobs. Some of us are working from home. Some of us are finding having to find new rhythms, new ways of figuring out what we do. But finding a couple of anchor points in the day can be really can be helpful, of touchstones, and whatever that looks like for you, whether that's if you have a cup of coffee, or when you connect in, or meals, or whatever that looks like, to set some kind of boundary or structure in the flow of the day. And then, thinking of creativity and projects, sometimes just getting out of our mind. And I put creative projects intentionally because it may be sometimes getting out of our heads and moving, using just those different synapses. It may be simple of looking at photos or coloring, or something that just invites you to get out of a linear kind of place. And then I've included journaling and meditating and focusing on your breath and music. Those are all things that can help us all, like, self-soothe, help you connect to what is going on inside of you, inside of your feelings, inside of your heart, inside of your mind, and recognizing that we're body, mind, and spirit. That they all fit together. And so in the next slide, I have just a few more things to think about that are more about resources too, that can try to avail yourself to. If you're employed and you have an employer that has an employee assistant program, many places, I know at Providence, we actually have behavioral health resources for our employees to reach out, access to therapists, but it runs the gamut of information. And so I'd encourage you to check and see what your employer offers for you. This is free, it's often part of your benefits. Spiritual care is important as we ask these bigger questions, as we long to belong. If you have a faith community that you're a part of, and again, these have kind of been reorganized as well. They look like FaceTime and Zoom meetings, but whatever it is that nurtures your spirit, but that connection to a faith community, again, realizing that you're not alone. There are primary care resources because our primary care, body, mind, and spirit, again, as whole people, if you reach out to a primary care provider, that's another resource. Fitness outlets, metabolizing and moving is a really important part of wellness. And it actually helps us literally metabolize our emotions. There are a number of free resources, LA Fitness, to do workouts at home. Believe it or not, you can do that if you haven't already been trying to do that. But they're free. There are a number of apps that can help you move and connect with your body. Of course, nature, being out in nature, being outside. We're really blessed where we live, and with the weather that we're having, to find ways to think bigger and to be out with creation and nature. Friends and Zoom gatherings, animal therapy. I can't say enough about that. One of the things I've noticed is that there are no dogs available to adopt, even if you wanted to, but there's been this big push. Lots of people are finding that companionship with an animal of some sort and spending time. That actually, there's evidence that says there's something about looking into an animal's eyes that causes us and invites us into a different way of being calm and present to one another. So this was super fast, but these are just some ideas. Maybe if you haven't already thought about them and you've been kind of thinking about it, maybe this will prompt you to move into trying something on. But I invite you to try something, to be gentle with yourself, and as Keith said, to recognize that you're not alone in this. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Angie. We'll now move on to Ruth Middlebrook.
Well, greetings to everyone and good evening. It was really hard to figure out what to try to cover in 5 minutes, and I knew there was absolutely no way that everything that needed to be said could be said in a 5-minute presentation, and I had no idea what other speakers were going to be addressing. So I was really excited to hear Angie talking about grief, because that was one of those things that I did not address in my talk. So it'll be interesting to see the different pieces we all bring to this. So I'm honored to be here tonight, and I'm encouraged to know that this important conversation is taking place. unique challenges we have faced these past few months have caused me to collaborate with others in a new way. When I think about the Olympia School District specifically and how they've tried to respond to the social and emotional well-beings of our students and families these past few months, it really has seemed like it's a moving target. It seemed like every few weeks the needs shifted. And disoriented was an apt descriptor for my emotional state of being, particularly early in the transition. In my current role, I work closely with our district counselors and social workers, and we have worked hard together to respond to these shifting concerns. When schools first closed, our primary focus was on supporting students and families with their fears about physical safety. Just how contagious is this pandemic? How do I talk with my younger children about germs and infection? And then, as schools continued to be closed, we were scrambling to help parents understand how to support their children with online learning, how to manage behaviors, and how to deal with the stress of continued isolation. As closures continued, there were the added fears of financial insecurities from lost incomes. And now the heart of our community grieves and protests against the continued brutal evidence of systemic violence and racism in our country. The next slide. Through all of this, our rates of depression and anxiety have increased significantly. Certainly research tells us this is true, but also our own experience, we just know it's true. There is a collective stress experienced by most, if not all of us. Stress can be tolerable if we use healthy coping strategies, and it can even be helpful if it motivates us to take safety measures. But too much stress can be overwhelming. One study I read identified loneliness or isolation as the #1 contributing factor to these increased levels of anxiety, depression, and stress we are currently experiencing. Anxiety and stress in children can manifest itself as anger, difficulty with sleeping, defiance, extreme reactions that are inappropriate to the situation, and the inability to focus, among other symptoms. With school closures, our children and their parents have lost a valuable support system and a place to talk about these experiences with a variety of trusted adults, making it even more important for parents to work at being available to listen to their children. Being an active listener includes accepting their feelings and letting them know it's okay to feel sad, upset, or stressed. Crying also is an effective way to relieve stress and grief. Next slide. In the absence of typical routines, it is even more important to establish and maintain routines at home. Set up a schedule that includes waking up and getting dressed, setting aside time for learning and play, and keeping a bedtime routine as well. Be sure to include age-appropriate breaks from online learning and plenty of family relaxation and fun. When it's age-appropriate, involve your children in setting up these routines. Sit with them, plan it out, and negotiate this together. Some other suggestions are finding fun ways to maintain contact with individuals your child is separated from, such as elderly grandparents or classmates at school, and getting creative with that. Encourage physical activity and time outside when possible. Staying active and being out in nature are helpful ways of mitigating anxiety and building resilience. But most importantly, I think it's important to use this opportunity as use this time as an opportunity to teach distress tolerance skills, because these are skills that will be helpful to your kids throughout their lives. Next slide. Looking ahead, the Olympia School District Counseling Team is actively engaged in figuring out how to support our students as they return to school in the fall, whatever form that takes. We envision this social emotional effort as a three-legged stool, with students, staff, and families as the three legs, and community partnerships as the seat of the stool, connected to each leg and supporting the work that needs to be done. We will be working to facilitate social connections, enhance relationships, and teach coping skills, not only for our students, but for our staff as well. Unlike an acute traumatic stressor that has a distinct beginning and end, the ongoing and uncertain nature of the COVID-19 pandemic creates the potential for chronic stress, which can cause the body to stay in a constant state of alertness despite being in no immediate danger. We will therefore endeavor to use a trauma-informed lens when planning for intervention and responding to mental health needs in our school community. Such an approach acknowledges that this crisis and all of its ripple effects can limit a student's ability to attend and learn and to regulate their behaviors and emotions. This is true, though, not only for students, but also for adults as well. As crazy as these times feel, it is important to remember that the feelings we are experiencing represent a normal response to an abnormal situation. And we must not forget that we are all in this together. I've tried to keep this presentation broad in its overview, and so I've put all of my resources and suggestions in a compilation that will be available to you. My understanding is it can be accessed on the city's COVID-19 response page. I thank you for your time and thank you for including me in this conversation.
Thank you, Ruth. Next speaker is Marissa Strobel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Marissa Strobel. I'm the Community Outreach Specialist for the Crisis Clinic. I've been with the Crisis Clinic since 2017, and I entered this position in August of 2019, but I just want to briefly mention what the Crisis Clinic is for those of you who are tuning in and maybe don't know about our services. So the Crisis Clinic has been around since 1972, and what we provide is a hotline service. So we have a crisis line and a teen/youth helpline. And first and foremost, our crisis lines are unique. That means that, we're the only anonymous, confidential, and free crisis line in all of Washington state. And it's also covered 24/7. And so even with COVID entering the premise and everything like that, we're still keeping the lines operating. So they're available, they're accessible, they're always going to be answered by our wonderful volunteers. I'd like to give a shout out to our volunteers. Thank you guys if anyone's tuning in. We really appreciate your service during this time. We really depend on our volunteers for answering the phone lines. They've all been trained with roughly 60+ hours of crisis intervention training before being a phone line volunteer. And so I want everybody to know that whoever's answering, we focus on respect, empathy, and compassion for our callers. And so our motto is also no crisis is too small. We truly mean that. Somebody could be calling, just to be validated in the feelings that they're having through this crisis. We're getting a lot of phone calls recently concerned about COVID, people needing resources in the community, and that is also something we provide other than emotional support. So the Crisis Clinic offers emotional support for our callers and also resources if that's what they're calling us about. And so on the screen you have available, we use 211 Washington Information Network for most of our resources. And we also have a community service list that is available on our website, crisis-clinic.org. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, there's going to be a list for Thurston County and Mason County. We have resources for both of those counties, and it's accessible anytime. You're welcome to take it, print it out for yourself or somebody who needs it. And we utilize those two resources when individuals are calling us, maybe needing a place to stay for the evening. I think we can go on to the next slide. So if you're wondering or you're curious about what kind of resources and referrals that we can hand out to individuals, our community service list addresses all of the shown topics on your screen there. And so if you're calling and you need, a place to stay for the night, we would utilize the emergency coordinated shelter entry line. Or, if somebody needs financial service, they need a phone number to, Salvation Army, we're more than happy to help out with that. And so callers can reach us. Next slide. Callers can reach us through the two lines that we have listed. So the crisis line is our general crisis line. Both the crisis line and the teen/youth helpline are 24 hours every day. Anytime you call, there will be somebody on the other side to answer your call. I do know that since we're getting an increase of callers, sometimes we will be busy with someone else on the other line. And so if you do end up receiving that voicemail, it'll just let you know that we're currently busy assisting another caller and to call back in about 10 minutes. So if you're calling and you can't get through to us, I recommend just being patient and maybe giving it about 10 to 15 minutes so that we can wrap up the previous call and move on to yours. And so we also have the teen/youth helpline, which is designated for anyone under the age of 18. So, like we said earlier, maybe students And I mean, anybody of any age, really, we're all going through this really difficult time, and you need somebody to validate what you're feeling, just somebody who will listen and be non-judgmental and be compassionate. And so this is kind of what we do. We're an outlet in that sense. So if you just need somebody to listen, or if you just need a phone number or address to a resource in your area, we're the place to call.
Thank you, Marissa. Next speaker is Ann Larson.
Hello, Olympia. It's so great to be a part of this panel. I'm just super impressed and inspired by what I've heard so far tonight. So I'm Ann Larson. I am the Outreach Services Coordinator for the Olympia Police Department. I'm a civilian. I drive a Nissan Leaf, and I went to the Evergreen State College. So just to clarify my role here at the police department. And I'm going to talk tonight about the Crisis Response Unit and the Familiar Faces program. Next slide, Keith. So I'm a big visual person, and I always like to see what people are talking about. So this is just a visual of some of our teammates. So the folks in teal are our Crisis Response Unit. We have 6 full-time Crisis Response Unit folks. And then the 2 people on the other side of me are 2 of our Familiar Faces peers. That is Keith and Melissa. So they are contracted with Catholic Community Services, and our crew team is contracted with Recovery Innovations. And I'll tell you more about them, but I just wanted you to have a little bit of a visual when I'm going through the next slides of what these teams look like. So the crew team, or Crisis Response Unit, we run 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and we are staffed. We are staffed with 2 people. So at 7 a.m. there are 2 behavioral health specialists that start their day out, and they run until 3:30. At 12:30 we have 2 more come on, so there's an overlap in the middle of the day, and they run until 9 o'clock at night. So if they get a call at 8:55, they're going to answer it, and they're going to work it until the call is done. We have 4 guiding principles that we work under, and that is street outreach, harm reduction, trauma-informed care, and cultural competency. So we do, just like the crisis clinic, we don't try to define someone's crisis. When you call, we respond. And so what we're really good at is being client-centered, being consistent. It's so great. We've had the same employees since we've started. Being positive, being free of judgment. My crew team members are super amazing communicators, and they're really good at verbal de-escalation. So those are kind of how we approach every situation that we encounter. So we've been up and running the entire time. Obviously in the first few weeks of the pandemic, there was a lot of fear in all of us, and it was, like somebody else mentioned, kind of trying to put your thumb on what was happening in the world and not really being able to. And so, but we decided that both of the teams would continue to operate. And so I just kind of wanted to show you what we've been doing during the last month, so you can kind of get a picture of what we do. So someone can get a hold of the Crisis Response Unit in multiple ways. So a lot of them you'll see is they self-initiate. So everything we do is out in the community. So they're either in a van or on the street. We don't have an office that we see people at. So oftentimes a lot of their contacts are self-initiated. They're walking around in the morning saying good morning to people, and they'll see somebody maybe at the Salvation Army or Union Gospel Mission that's having a hard time, and they'll engage with them and try to help them out. Like you saw in the picture, the crew team is on police radio, and so they hear all the calls that are going on around in the city of Olympia, so they can be dispatched by TCOM. A citizen would just call the non-emergency number, and if you're driving in your car and you can't remember that, it's okay to call 911 as well. They can get referred to a call by law enforcement, so law enforcement would request them over the radio to come to a situation. Referred by fire, hospitals, city staff, so that might be clean team or an ambassador. And then that referred by other is our partners, typically Intercity Transit, Union Gospel Mission, maybe Salvation Army, mitigation site. So that's kind of a broad look of what we're doing during the month. So, and we track out who we're on scene with, because we are a part of the police department. A lot of folks want to know that the right tool is being used for the situation. And so oftentimes there'll be a situation where law enforcement will call the crisis response unit, and then they'll be on scene with each other for a little bit, and then the law enforcement officers will leave. A lot of folks that we serve are pretty medically fragile, and so sometimes our fire department will call us because as we heard from our earlier presentation with Providence, we're serving the whole human, and they have maybe some behavioral health and some medical situations going on, city staff, and then other folks, like maybe it's a familiar face participant, which we'll talk about later, and the crisis response unit, and they're both kind of co-managing that situation. All right, so everybody wants to know, like, what's the big thing? So we break it down into a couple different categories. So the presenting problem, so that's a problem that is being called out, or the reason that they're being dispatched. So a mental health situation was the greatest. Other is typically a combination of it could be domestic violence, it could be a combination, like a co-occurring. Substance use is obviously pretty high, medical, and then poverty. And I should say in the other category, disability is a big reason for a lot of our calls, especially in the downtown core. Maybe it's one of our folks that's in a wheelchair that needs help getting back into their wheelchair or something like that. So that would be the reason for that call. All right, so many folks know that intercity transit reduced their ridership, and they've been awesome with putting community vans in place and doing all those other kinds of things. But our crew team has become a little bit of a crewber during these times and transporting folks. And you'll see that evergreen treatment, and that we could add the methadone clinic to that because that's one and the same. We're really working hard in keeping people stable and keeping people having some bit of normalcy. If someone at the mitigation site needs to get to the methadone clinic and they miss their dial lift, for sure we're gonna pop them in the crew van and bring them there. So it's kind of a breath of where we are taking people throughout the city of Olympia. And then referrals. So we're not long-term case management. Sometimes it happens because we have a lot of folks that we see on a daily basis, and we can start to help connect them and problem solve with them. But really, we rely on so many of our partners in the system of care that we refer people to. So Community Action Council for those housing consults, or we take a lot of people to urgent care, PAC team, or DSHS when you lose your EBT card. So we really connect to a lot of our service providers in Olympia or Thurston County. All right, and then Keith and Melissa, their arm of what we do, where crew is a little bit of that lighter touch, Keith and Melissa wrap around you like a helicopter mom. They are intensive case management for Olympia's some of the most vulnerable population that we have that are traditionally system resistant. Maybe they've been trying and just nothing's ever worked, and then they've kind of given up hope. So our peers have lived experience with incarceration and addiction and poverty. We just got a mental health professional on with Keith and Melissa about 2 weeks ago, so that's super incredible. I spent about 8 hours today hiring or interviewing for our 6 new positions. I'm super excited about that. We're gonna get 4 additional peers, a program manager, and another mental health professional. What we do is we get you, if you're on our client list, we move with you throughout every stage of your life. You become pregnant, we don't pass you off because we only do single adults. You go to treatment, we stick with you, we pick you up after treatment. You get housed, we don't stop connecting with you because we work with the human on where the human is at that time. So in May, they had 188 contacts with their clients, and they currently have 22 clients. All right, so I'm a big believer in public service. I am a diehard public servant, and that is how I guide our teams. Our approach to our work is as public servants. I really believe that we work for the community, and we can't exist in any other manner. Like, we are here for the community, and that's how we exist. So if our community adjusts, we adjust with our community. During COVID, it's been tough, and I've worried about my staff, and I've worried about me. But I wake up in the morning, and I am just dedicated to service over self. I always try to default to service. We show up, we show compassion, respond to the human in front of us, and obviously have proper PPE protocols. So that's what we've been doing. I'm happy to expand if anyone has any questions during the chat.
Thank you, Ann, Marissa, Ruth, and Angie. We will move on to community and committee questions, and just remind everybody that what you're feeling is normal, that you're not alone, that there are resources to help, and that we will be better on the other side. So thank you. Mr. Byrne.
All right, thank you, Keith. So I just want to check in with the committee real quick. We ran just a little bit long on the presentations, about 7 minutes. I've got about 5 questions queued up, and I just want to make sure if we go a little past 6:30 to get to those 7, are you okay with that? I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay. All right. So the first question I have is, so this is a question probably for Ruth. It says, if children are angry and emotional every day to complete homework online and paper packets, how much should parents push them to complete assignments versus let them be emotional and do other activities for their mental and physical well-being? It's been an extremely difficult time. When does the mental well-being become more important than classwork?
Well, first of all, I would say the mental well-being always is more important than classwork. In terms of, and this is something we are hearing from a lot of families. The challenges of this are just staggering. We hear stories of, parents that are trying to do their own jobs as well as teach their children, and we have teachers who are trying to teach and take care of their own children. So I think what I would really recommend is just talking to your children's teacher and kind of communicating the difficulties you're experiencing and talking about what might be some reasonable ways of chunking that up, maybe just doing smaller steps or just doing a part of it and kind of seeing what's reasonable. But absolutely, I feel like your children's mental health and well-being comes before the academic work.
Thank you, Ruth. Here's another, it's both a resource and a question. So one of the folks that have logged in says there is a resource for youth 0 to 21 living in Thurston County that can get immediate support for mental health needs through the Thurston Mason Children's Crisis Stabilization Services that's funded in part by Thurston County Treatment Sales Tax. And for those that are interested, that phone number is 360-480-5721. And I might just ask the panelists if there are other resources that might be available in the area for children or for young adults.
Someone speaking to that. I did add some resources to the materials that I passed to Keith to post on the site. So there are some resources listed there. I don't know if other people have added that as well or want to speak to that.
Okay, I'm going to move on here. And this is a question for you. I think folks see the value in the crisis response team and wondering why it's not a 24-hour resource.
That's great. I would love to make it a 24-hour resource. Can I get some more money? There's no lack of desire to make it 24/7. It's just the constraints of my budget.
All right, thanks, Ann. All right, I'm just down to a couple other questions. So if those of you that are online, if we've got a little bit of time, if you have a question, now's the time to ask it. Again, down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A tab. And if you put your question there, I will see it and pose it to the group. Another resource that one of our attendees put up is to remind folks that the Olympia Free Clinic downtown is one of the resources for this community for individuals with both physical and mental health needs. And it's one of the resources that the Crisis Clinic has made referrals to. So again, I don't know if there's anyone of the panelists or the council members that want to give any more about the Olympia Free Clinic, but that's another resource that's up there. So I'll pause for a minute.
I'll take this moment to also recognize another service that reached out to us, and they were interested in this panel, but we couldn't do another person, and that was Joe Avalos at the Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Organization. Wanted us to know or share information that they have a 24/7 in-person crisis response. It's ohrs.org. And the free clinic is cool too.
All right, here's another question, I think probably for Ruth. Ruth, and maybe others too, actually. It says, I have seen a regression in my child since COVID and distance learning. I have read that this is normal. Can you speak to this related to stress?
Well, I can speak to my own regression that I've experienced. I mean, the reality of stress is it's like it just freezes my brain and it makes it the problem solving skills, the stress I'm experiencing and talking tonight. I can't find my words half the time. So yeah, absolutely. It's related. And what I would really encourage you to do, one of the silver linings of all of this closure and all this Zoom meetings that we've now, who knew that Zoom was going to be such a part of our lives in January, is that there's been incredible collaboration happening with the counselors across the school district. So assuming, and I'm sure this is true of whatever district your child might be in, but I would really encourage you to connect with the counselor in your student's school, because they are trying to be on top of this and being responsive. And we have collected so many resources and materials and have ideas to share with you. So just if you would connect individually with your counselors, what I would recommend.
Any other panelists want to add in there? Okay. Katie Manager, the Executive Director of Olympia Free Clinic, is one of the folks that have tuned in, and she just wanted me to put out there that if you need to make an appointment with the Olympia Free Clinic, you can call 360-890-4074, extension 3. And thank you, Katie, for putting that in the chat so I could put that out there. The next question is around mental health resources. I don't know if they called it prenatal mental health, to address some of the folks who are already at risk for isolation, depression during a postpartum period.
You know, I'm not speaking on behalf of Providence with this one, but what I do know of is BHR has a program called Harvest, and, but I don't know specifically what additional resources they have for the neonatal and the new mothers. But that might be another resource just to call out in our community. Behavioral health resources, and then specifically the Harvest program.
Great, thank you.
And I just would add, I think there might be Facebook support groups for new moms and stuff struggling and that need that connectedness as well. I'm pretty sure I've heard some members of my own family that have benefited from that support.
This one's for Keith. Just folks that are logged in would love when you put stuff up to make sure the email addresses and contact information for all the panelists become part of the resources that you put up there, because there's folks interested in reaching out to them.
I'll make sure that happens.
All right. Marissa, a quick question for you. During your presentation, you mentioned your website, and I'm wondering if you could provide the website address for those that are logged in here.
Sure, yeah. So it's www.crisis-clinic.org. And we also have a Facebook page that you can connect with us in as well.
Awesome, thank you. And I really appreciate those that have tuned in that are filling up the Q&A box with other resources in our communities that are very vital, like Pizza Clatch, Partners in Prevention Education, Stonewall Youth, BHR was mentioned. There are a lot of great resources in our community available. And so, you know, I'm wondering, Keith, also as we put resource lists up, that we might include some of those other resources for folks and the contact information.
Absolutely, we'll be as comprehensive as possible.
All right, thanks, Keith. I did have a question. I think, where will this recording, this event, be available for future public viewing? And I'll take that one. So the meetings are recorded and are available the following day on the city's online meeting management system, which is www.olympia.legistar.com. And if you go there, you navigate to this day, you'll see the video feed. And then I imagine, Keith, you'll be posting all the resources from this off our COVID-19 page?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That is the last question I have from online. And so at this point in time, I want to turn it over to committee members for any questions they might have of the panelists before we finish up.
To either council members Madrone or Gilman have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just have a couple comments I'd like to share if that's appropriate.
Yeah, please.
Cool. Well, thanks again to all of you. Like I said before we came on, you're all working very hard right now, and coming and doing this one more thing, it means a lot to us at the city and to all the people who are watching and whoever's going to watch and download this later. And you're all doing great work. And Anne in particular, we're hearing a lot of calls to provide the kind of services you provide. So I'm going to take that to heart as a council member to make sure that I'm helping to share the good work that you're doing at the city, because we really appreciate it. And I want to thank whoever jumped in on the Q&A to share organizations like Pizza Clatch and Stonewall Youth. There are people who experience grief and trauma differently based on their identities, and there are resources out there. Keith, you know, I'll help you put that list together so you don't have to do it all. I want to share a quote that is from somebody that has been a teacher for me in my past, Joanna Macy. "The sorrow, grief, and rage you feel is a measure of your humanity and your evolutionary maturity. As your heart breaks open, there will be room for the whole world to heal." And just to finish up, it takes so much strength to get through what we're going through every single day. And for a lot of people before the pandemic, that was true for them too. And everybody gets to take a break from being strong. So take care of yourselves.
I did actually have one question, and I'm not sure if any of the panelists, it's okay if you're not qualified to speak to this, but I'm actually curious what are the recommendations if someone is actually concerned about potentially doing harm to themselves, or afraid that a loved one is really veering into a dangerous place mental health wise. Is there a recommendation that anyone on here can give to a situation like that?
Hey, Renata, if they live in the city of Olympia, I would highly recommend that you would call the crew team. They're really great at that stuff. Like suicidal, are you talking suicidal ideation and self-harm? Yeah, for sure. I would recommend the crew.
Great. All right.
I'm assuming Marissa probably also has 3 slots.
Something to add?
I was about to chime in. Yeah, I didn't want to cut anybody off, but you know, I tried to keep my talk to about 5 minutes, so I didn't mention that the designated crisis responders, so the DCR through the Olympic Health and Recovery Services, we actually take their calls. They're rolled over to us when their phone lines are busy. And so if a caller at any point in time were to explain the situation, or if I thought they were medium to high risk for suicide, then I would refer them to the DCRs. So we would give them a phone call. Their phone number is 360. So if anybody would like this phone number, this is for the DCR office, 360-586-1186. And so I would always recommend that.
Great.
And if I can just add, the other thing I would add is having if you have a loved one that you're concerned about, is having that conversation with them and letting them know you're concerned about them, and then going with them to get help and following through on that.
And that's thank you for adding that part. And I know a lot of people, it's very common if someone's talking about taking their own life to think that, like, oh, if I engage in this conversation, I might be pushing them in a direction. And what I've at least learned is that is not the case, that it's okay. It is good to engage in that conversation with someone, but I wanted to make sure, say thank you. And I think with that, oh, okay, you do, Clark. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment briefly. I know everybody's journey is unique. I've been heartbroken, hopeful, exhilarated, scared for the last 3 months. I've jumped at every sudden noise and every low-flying airplane. Part of my coping has been getting up every morning, praying and exercising before electronics or news, and practicing music every afternoon before I enter the city meetings for the day. I don't usually recommend trusting a politician, but I'd say, trust me, you're loved and you belong in Olympia. Thanks for showing up, listening and learning tonight. We're stronger together. And I wanted to acknowledge there was a text or a question that came up about there were 2 more people in the photo that Ann showed. It was Officer Javier Solas and Lieutenant Amy King. And I've watched them both in uniform, but be very compassionate responders and helping people navigate crisis on the sidewalk downtown. So I wanted to acknowledge that also. Thanks for tuning in.
Great. Oh, thank you so much again to our 4 panelists for sharing your time and your expertise from different realms on the topic with all of us. Keith for pulling this all together, and Jay for navigating the process with us tonight. And good to see my council mates on the line as well. Thanks to the community for joining, and I hope that we're all going easy on ourselves and just not minimizing what we're going through, whether it's concerns about health, concerns about economic impacts, the impacts of racism and colonization. We have to go easy on ourselves and learn how to take care of ourselves and take care of our community better. So thank you, panelists, for helping us learn more about that, and we'll see everybody soon.
Thank you.